Last time we were playing with the VN, we had it down at max performance on the dyno and it made 103 kilowatts at the tyres, which is okay. It's not brilliant, but it's okay. So it's got a new fuel pump, it's got a Haltech ECU, and I think it's time that we started focusing our attention on this L67 short block, build it up, get it in the car, and then see what sort of power we can really make with this thing. But before we do that, I need to do a little prep work on this engine. Namely, I've got to pull the balancer off, timing cover off, because it's getting a camshaft. That's right, we're going to put a cam in this thing. It's going to be camshaft, high boost pulley, E85. It's actually going to make some power. It's going to be awesome. But we're going to pull that balancer off first, and that is a bit of a job. I'm going to show you how to do that right now. So to remove our balancer, we need a harmonic balancer puller. But this particular balancer presents some issues, namely in that the hole is too small at the front for the balancer to push in against the snout of the crank. So to do this, they recommend using a Allen key bolt inside there to push against the crank. I don't have one of those, but I've modified this bolt, drilled the end a bit, locked up some nuts on the end just to create kind of somewhere for the front of the balancer puller to push against. So put that in against our crankshaft, wind that in, and then we've got 3 small bolts to go in there because the bolts that actually come with the balancer kit do not fit in there. So we've got our 3 small bolts. I've added some washers to each. Get our Ryobi, make sure it's turning the right way. Yep. Let's see if this works. And there we have it. Our balancer is off. Wow, what a mess. So I gotta remember those ones go on the crank sensor. Okay then, get a timing cover off. So oil pump is built into the timing cover like it is with the Barras. Yeah, and pretty much all the V6s are the same, whether they're Buick or VS or Ecotechs. But yeah, we'll clean that up before we put it back on. Now we can see our timing chain. So I'll just remove the tensioner. Yeah, maybe we'll just go to Holden and get a new chain. Yeah, I reckon that's probably got a bit of slack in it. No, wrong way. So I'm just lining up the timing marks at the moment, the front of the crank pulley and the cam pulley, just so we know where they need to line up when we put the cam back in. Alrighty, well, let's pull this cam bolt and we'll slide the cam out. Damn it. That's got to be the tightest cam bolt I've ever felt, but I looked up the book and yeah, they're supposed to be tight, like 110 Newton meters and then turn 90 degrees tight. That is like head bolt tight. Why they need that much load on a camshaft bolt, I really don't know, but there you have it. Okay, that's about it. All right, we'll slide that off nice and gently. We'll clean them up in the parts washer. We'll get a new timing chain. Now, I've got a camshaft in there. Wow, I forget how they retain these. So before we remove the cam, we obviously have to remove the lifters. And like the LS engine, the lifters are held in by a big plastic lifter bucket. Roller lifters, of course. Okay. Seriously, this motor really hasn't seen much maintenance. These lifters are gummed in here really good. They should move fairly freely, but they're just wedged in there tight because they've probably got a heap of varnish under the lifter bore. It makes it really hard to get them up out of the bore, which means we might have to just sort of lever them out. Getting there. Why? Oh, wow. Wow. Bits of the lift are actually breaking away. They're so tight in there, mainly because of the varnish that's on the lower side of the lifter bore. I'm not even going to be able to get at them from underneath. Got a crankshaft in the road and a camshaft in the road. Well, seeing that two of our lifters are kind of stuck high in the bore, hopefully they're high enough to clear the camshaft. So we'll pull the cam out. We've got to start by removing the camshaft sprocket, which you just got to lever gently, just rock it back and forth gently, slide it off the end of the cam, like so. And then you've got some retaining bolts here. Looks like Torx heads. Then we've just got our retaining plate here with a couple of Torx head bolts. So we'll undo those, pull off the camshaft retaining plate and slide the camshaft out. There we go. Okay, retaining plate. We do have a long bolt. Whoops, yep, hello, hello. Those lifters must have been clear enough. There you go. One tiny little camshaft. We'll throw that in the bin. No, we won't. Maybe we'll use it as a drag challenge trophy. The rods in this thing are so beefy. I love it. But we'll see if we can turn this thing over so we can get a better shot at that stuck lifter. Let's have a look. Oh, wow, still tight. Jesus Christ. Lifters are out. What a pain in the balls. Okay, so we've got the engine pulled down as far as it needs to be. Lifters are out, camshaft's out. So basically, we're going to do some cleanup. Then we can put this cam in, find some new lifters, get them in there, put it all back together, make some power. But we do have a long way to go yet. Remove some of this gasket. There. We've got the parts on order for our new lifters and our new timing chain, so they'll be here shortly. But in the meantime, I'll clean up this block. You may have noticed I'm on my little Heron Forbes roller stool. These things are awesome and perfect for when you're working on something low to the ground like this little V6. It's just ridiculous how dirty this thing is. So as you can see, it's got a balance shaft in the top here. That's just to balance out the inherent instabilities of a 90-degree V6. So we've got that block face pretty cleaned up now, so ready for a new gasket. I do have a full set of gaskets there from Mace Engineering, so we'll start putting them together soon. But while we're waiting on those lifters and timing chain, what I might do is flip this over and we'll change those rod bolts. So we've got a new set of rod bolts here from the guys at Mace Engineering. So what we're going to do is undo these one by one and replace them, use some ARP lube. So these are ARP 2000 rod bolts, so nice and strong. We will have no trouble with this thing once these are in. I'll just cut the packet open. Now, behind the lubricant, there's always this little piece of paper. It tells you how much torque to use. And in this case, 55 foot-pounds, or pound-foot, depending on how you like to say it. Because these are basically an American engine, you're going to find a lot of imperial sizes on them, but occasionally there are metric sizes as well. So you could use a 7/16 on these rod bolts, but the 11mm actually fits better. So I'll crack that off. So there's our first bolt. So there's a side-by-side comparison with the factory bolt and the ARP bolt. Now on the surface of it, the factory bolt actually looks more substantial, but these ARP bolts, especially like an ARP 2000, is a very strong rod bolt. Certainly it'll be a lot stronger than this thing. So we'll lube this up, torque it up. So ARP recommends that you lube the threads and then lube under the head of the bolt. So the lube allows you to get the right specification, because if you don't use lube, it can change the torque setting. The resistance of the threads or at that underhead side can actually change the torque setting. That can give you a false reading. We don't want that. So we'll slide that back in. So we've got our torque wrench here. Now the recommended setting was 55 foot-pounds. We don't have a foot-pounds torque wrench, we have newton meters, so converted that to 74.5. And this is actually precise enough that you can do half newton meters. Now many of you will be saying, why aren't you resizing the rods? Well, in most cases, yes you would. You would pull the engine apart, pull the rods off, resize the rods, but we're dealing with an engine that cost us, what, 500 bucks for the whole car. Let's just throw the rod bolts in there, see how we go. If we want to, down the track, build a whole new motor, we can do that. Rod bolts are cheap, and certainly cheap insurance in a case like this. Cool. We've got that one torqued up. There is another way to torque these up and get the right measurement, and that's via a rod bolt stretch indicator, which would go around that end and that end of the rod bolt. You can see there's a dimple there, and there's a dimple in the other end of the bolt. Stretch indicator goes on there, and when it reaches the right amount of stretch, that is the recommended setting for your rod bolt. That's how ARP prefers you do them. Unfortunately, not many people have them. Well, certainly not unless you've got a call for it, like, you know, a professional engine builder would have. But for someone like myself, probably don't do enough of them to need it. Here we have it, the last bolt. Our lifters and our timing chain have shown up. Now we've got our camshaft to install. Let's get that in. So this is a stage 3 Crow cam supplied by the guys at Mace Engineering. For those that like to know cam specs, it is 215 at 50 on the intake, 224 at 50 on the exhaust, with 564 lift and 534 lift and 116 degree lobe separation. So we'll lube that up, slide it in there, and yeah, put our lifters back on there. Line this up. So we've got that installed with the dot facing right down. So there's a dot here at the bottom of the wheel. So we'll line that up with the crankshaft pulley as well. But we have to rotate the crank around until we get to top dead center. Approximately there, but we will finesse that in a sec. Now this one goes on there. So we've got our 2 dots aligned there in the center line with the camshaft and the crankshaft. Put this pulley on and we've got our camshaft aligned right there. And pretty much there's only one way to go on anyway. Your keyways dictate how this all goes on. And then we've got our keyway there, and we've just got to make sure we rotate it around until it is definitely in the right spot. So we'll just rotate that slightly. So a lot of you are probably wondering why I haven't got a dial indicator set up. It's all pretty self-explanatory. The dots line up. If you line the dots up with top dead center, it really is foolproof. We've got that set up. It's not adjustable. We're right to go. It's 26 newton meters, so it only goes to 20. So it's 20 and a... Welcome to Scotty's Imprecise Engine Building Workshop. So now we've got our camshaft retaining bolt. In a VN Series 1 where they've got 3 bolts, it's 30 to 40 newton meters. In a VN to VR with 1 bolt, they reckon 190 to 200 newton meters in a camshaft retaining bolt. In these, they reckon 110 newton meters plus 90 degrees. That's a lot of torque. That's more torque than like a Kia Rio. So I'm just going to put it up there at about 110 newton meters with some Loctite. This thing will probably turn over. No, there's enough force against it. I'll maybe go a smidge more. There we go. Everyone's happy. It's done. No one saw a thing. We have some lifters. Shiny new ones. They should go in nicely. Let's whack some lube on them. Here's where we're at. We've got new rod bolts in there, new camshaft, new timing chain, new lifters. The short block is pretty much ready to go. We've got to put some heads on there, but before we do that, we need to put new valve springs and the titanium retainers in there. So we'll move over the bench and we'll do those heads before we can get them on this motor.